Okay guys, so I want to talk about the future of Bitcoin in this video, and specifically my predictions for what will happen to Bitcoin in the next little while. And I think I've got a pretty good perspective on this. I've been actively investing for the last couple of decades. I've seen Bitcoin go through all the different phases of growth that has taken it up to now. And I think it's really important to keep an eye on that evolution and really pick the best time to go into crypto, to whatever degree you want to go into it, right? Whether you're all in or whether it's a portion of your portfolio or whatever. I think you really need to keep an eye on where it's going in the future, because that's where the opportunity is. That's where the risk lies, what could actually happen here. So I've pulled together my thoughts on what I think is going to happen to Bitcoin over the next little while. I want to share all of these points with you and tell you why I'm making the predictions that I am. And at the end of the video, I'll sum the whole thing up and tell you what I think it all means in terms of whether or not we should be investing in Bitcoin right now. Let's get into it. Okay, let's talk about regulation and all the regulatory headwinds that Bitcoin is facing. This is nothing new, right? Bitcoin has faced regulatory difficulties since the beginning, and it's continuing to face them. Regulation is a complete patchwork mess. If you look across the world, different countries are doing all kinds of different things. Transactions and mining are now illegal in China. I'm sure everybody's seen that news as of last month. This will, I think, continue in the more authoritarian countries in the world. I think that they see Bitcoin as a threat to their control over the economy, and I think those governments are going to continue to take actions to rein in Bitcoin, just the way that China has done and the way that a lot of other authoritarian governments have done. That will absolutely continue. On the other extreme, though, I think that you see these developing countries, like the news out of El Salvador months ago when they adopted Bitcoin as legal tender. I think that, a lot of these developing countries see it as it's at least better than the mess they're in now, because they're either pegged their currency to the US dollar or they had adopted the US dollar the way El Salvador did. And that has all kinds of implications for control over their own sovereignty in terms of their own currency and their own economy. And so really moving to Bitcoin puts them in a better place than they were. It's cheaper, it's easier, it's potentially a more frictionless currency for some of these countries go forward. So I think that will continue to happen with developing nations. I think it's a good opportunity for them. And then I think in the middle of that spectrum, you have the wealthier capitalist Western democracies that are basically taking a fairly neutral stance for now on Bitcoin. They're classifying it as an asset. It's not legal tender. I think that is going to continue as well, right? I don't think there's going to be any significant movement on that front in developed countries, Western countries, over the next little while. I think that central banking regulation is in a place where it's going to continue. Basically, central banks cannot allow Bitcoin to become legal tender, I think, in these developed countries. So that status quo is going to continue, and all the difficulties that come along with that. So my prediction on the regulatory front is pretty much status quo. I don't think we're going to see any significant movement here. There might be some small incremental policy changes here and there, but that's it for the near-term future. Okay, the second thing would be volatility, right? So this is a problem with investing in Bitcoin. I think this terrifies a lot of people. You pour money into it and suddenly we see a 40-50% drawdown the next day. People are scared about that. I think the good news though here is volatility will decrease over time. That's my prediction. Why? Several reasons. One, money is going to continue to pour into Bitcoin, right? We see this trend. It's been happening for many, many years, and it's continuing to happen. There's more and more market capitalization being poured into Bitcoin. That's going to continue. The more money that's in Bitcoin, the more its value is anchored, and that is only going to decrease volatility over time. There's fewer coins to be mined over time, right? As we get closer and closer to that endpoint for mining activity, that's going to decrease volatility. I think that as more and more transactions are enabled by Bitcoin and on the blockchain network, that's going to anchor perceptions of value for what a Bitcoin is worth and what it can buy. And the more that happens, the more volatility is going to go down, right? People's perception of value does not change very quickly, right? We want to continue to pay the same amount for things, and we expect to continue to pay the same amount for things. And so that is a really, really good anchor for Bitcoin going forward as more transactions get driven into the network. And finally, over time, there's going to be more and more resolution of uncertainty, right? Nothing drives volatility more than uncertainty. People don't have the data that they need to make accurate decisions and future plans and that kind of thing, especially from the standpoint of the economy and what you might be able to buy with Bitcoin and that kind of thing. That is going to go down because over time, these questions are continually getting cleared up, right? About the legality, about taxation, about where you can spend your Bitcoin, about what's going to happen in this particular country or that particular country, or what Tesla's going to do or whatever it is. Those questions are continually getting answered, and that is going to drive volatility down as well, right? So I think if you're scared of Bitcoin volatility, look to the future because it's only going to get better. Okay, the third thing here that's really relevant, I think, is taxes, and I mentioned that a little bit, but basically Bitcoin has a really big tax problem, and it has to do with the fact that for the most part in most countries, Bitcoin is not classified as legal tender, which means that when you buy something with Bitcoin, you're engaging in a form of bartering, right? You're swapping one asset for another, and in most taxation jurisdictions, that leads to capital gains taxes of some kind, and so you have to deal with, well, what Bitcoin did I use for that transaction? Was it these ones with this particular cost base? Was it some other coin over here with a different cost base? Does my country take an average cost base over my entire holdings and apply that when it comes to tax time? So that's a big headache, and you have to sort of consider that every single time you make a Bitcoin transaction, which is a real damper on people's desire to transact in Bitcoin, dealing with all the tax headaches. Over time, though, this is going to get better. It's not going to change, right? I still don't think that you're going to see adoption as legal tender, which would eliminate the taxation problem. But I think what you will see is the wheels will get greased in terms of your ability to deal with that taxation, right? So from a fintech standpoint, I think that more and more companies and platforms are going to step up with better taxation solutions to enable that transaction liquidity. What are these? They're tools, they're streamlined processes, they're better reporting and auto generation of tax forms and all that kind of thing. So I think it'll get a lot easier, and I think that problem will fade into the background a little bit, and I think that will loosen up the taxation bottleneck associated with Bitcoin transactions, and people will be a little bit more free to spend their Bitcoin into the future, which is, I think, really, really good news as that slowly and incrementally gets better. Okay, the next point here I'll talk about is sustainability. So obviously, crypto in general, energy use is a big concern. We see this. People don't like the use of dirty energy in Bitcoin. There's a lot of pressure moving towards renewable energy for mining, but that still doesn't solve all the problems because at the end of the day, it's still energy use, and maybe that renewable energy could have gone to some other use. There's a whole opportunity cost and carbon footprint associated with Bitcoin that's a bad news story for the most part, at least from a perception standpoint. But if you really dig into this, I think there is data out there that says, look, Bitcoin mining, the actual energy use, it compares favorably to other activities, right? Like I was reading an article the other day that made the point of the carbon footprint and the energy cost of gold mining and it being far in excess of crypto mining, right? Same thing with the carbon footprint and energy usage of normal global banking operations, right? So Bitcoin has the potential to replace and reduce all of the overhead in the financial industry associated with legacy banking. And if it can, then it brings down the energy use of that legacy banking and replaces it with crypto mining. That's actually a favorable trade-off. And again, the same thing with gold mining, right? So I think it's not as bad as it is. I think the other thing, the prediction that I would make for the future in terms of sustainability of mining operations is that's going to get better as well. And here's why. And this is a subtle point, but the increased renewable energy usage in mining is really, really important because the nature of renewables is that it is somewhat localized in a certain area. The excess renewable energy is localized. And so Bitcoin miners are getting really, really good at identifying countries, jurisdictions, areas, states, whatever it is, where there is an excess of renewable energy. They can move those mining operations to that locale and they can make use of that excess renewable energy that otherwise would have gone to waste, right? Because one thing that people don't understand is that you cannot easily move energy around, whether it's renewable or not. The grid is bottlenecked in many, many places. And so if you can be co-located next to energy generation, you can sidestep that problem and you can get access to really cheap energy. So there's a huge incentive for crypto miners to do that, to be portable, to respond quickly, and to move to areas where they can use up excess renewable capacity. And the more that they are able to do this and the more that renewable energy comes online, the more this sustainability problem will start to disappear disappear, or continue to disappear, I should say, for Bitcoin. And I think that will be less and less of a problem going into the future, right? So I think that right now is as bad as it will be. It's only going to get better as we go. Another good news story, I think, for Bitcoin. And okay, the next point I'll make here is broader integration. And this is really the big one, right? It's a slow and painful process in terms of merchants and sellers to accept Bitcoin for different transactions and stuff for a lot of good reasons, right? But it's now slowly getting better. There are more and more people that are willing to accept Bitcoin as a form of payment. That's increasing the number of opportunities that people have to spend their Bitcoin, and it's making additional liquidity. There's enough demand now from people that want to spend their Bitcoin that big players are responding to it. So we see that banks and payment providers and payment platforms are actually stepping up and launching crypto solutions. We see it with brokers launching more and more crypto trading. We see more ETFs coming out there. We see Square and PayPal adding crypto integration. There was a big rumor, last month about Amazon. They had posted a job for a blockchain dev lead. And so it's like, oh my God, what's Amazon doing? Are they going to launch a coin? Are they going to accept Bitcoin? I don't think we know. Maybe that rumor's overblown. There was a similar potentially overblown rumor at Walmart. But I think those are the indications for the future you need to look at, right? Which is, hey, the big guys are interested in this because the demand is there. There's a lot of benefit for them in doing something with crypto. Maybe Bitcoin, AMC is going to accept Bitcoin as payment, they announced. Tesla, who knows, right? I mean, they may accept it. They're holding a ton of it. They keep flip-flopping, don't know. But anyway, there's a lot of indications that broader integration is coming. There's really no indications that broader integration is shrinking, right? We know which direction it's going in, right? So for the future, it's going to become easier. And again, nothing but a good news story for Bitcoin on that front. Okay, let's talk about risks and specifically future risks to Bitcoin. What's going to happen into the future? Is there potential that we could lose all our money if we buy Bitcoin? There's a few risks that you need to be aware of. Number one, there is some risk, I think, that developed countries, big, rich, wealthy democracies even, could ban Bitcoin. And suddenly the value goes to zero, because then there's no hope that you could ever spend all that stored value that you have in your Bitcoin. I think this is incredibly unlikely in today's climate. I think a few years ago, many years ago actually, maybe it could have happened, but now I don't think it can. I don't think there's a legal basis for a ban like this in most democratic capitalist countries. Really, we have an established framework that now addresses Bitcoin as an asset, and that's fine. There's a lot of legal protections that would apply to that. I think if the government moved to try to curtail or implement some sort of softer ban, they'd have an enormous legal fight on their hands, and really for what reason, right? I don't think there's a lot of argument for really pushing that sort of policy agenda. So I see that as incredibly remote. The second risk here is that a central bank, a major central bank in a major established economy could launch their own coin, right? And if they did, that would be the officially sanctioned coin that would be legal tender, and then that could potentially eclipse any potential use of Bitcoin. You would use the official central bank-backed coin, crypto coin of that country. Not in the short term, right? That's not going to happen. The speed of government is incredibly slow. It's going to be a long time, I think, before a major central bank actually launches a coin. In the long term, though, I think it will happen. I think it's inevitable that it happens. I think at some point that is exactly what will go on, right? So that particular risk to Bitcoin is something that you have to look at from a timing perspective. Right now, and maybe into the intermediate future, no. Long term, yeah, right? So I think you totally have to understand that governments are very slowly and carefully moving in exactly that direction. And I think you have to stay alert to that so you know what's going to happen to your Bitcoin. Now, that said, what happens when a central bank actually issues a digital coin? I think personally that it would slowly kill the other leading coins at the time. I think it would stifle growth, and then I think it would push Bitcoin back into the dark corners where it first came from, and it would exist as this sort of under the covers parallel international sort of method to exchange value. I could see that happening. I don't necessarily see it going to zero, because it would still have a use in these niche cases, but a lot of the value that exists there today, I do think would evaporate, right? So I think this risk absolutely does exist in the future. The third risk I think here is specific to Bitcoin, and it's just the simple fact that another coin couldn't replace it, right? There's a lot of competing coins out there. There's the major coins, you know, Doge and Ethereum and XRP and all that. And then there's these altcoins, you know, there's an endless amount of them. So what's the possibility that some other coin is going to overtake Bitcoin as the one that wins, right? You know, if that's even a thing. Could that happen? Yeah, I think it could. I think there are other risks that we don't see there yet. I think that, you know, a big player like Amazon could launch their own coin, and they might have the weight behind them then to actually be a really existential threat to Bitcoin. I think that could happen. Or there could just be broad adoption overtake from one of the other major coins. Ethereum could overtake Bitcoin. You know, Ripple and some of the functionality in the Ripple network for XRP could actually drive adoption there. I don't really know what's going to happen there. My prediction would be that Bitcoin has so much momentum behind it now as the original, you know, and there's so much stored value in there right now. There's a lot of Bitcoin believers that I find that unlikely, right? Unless something really dramatic shakes up the existing coin landscape, my prediction would be that Bitcoin is going to be the leader well into the future. I don't see it being unseated. Okay, so let's wrap it all up here, right? So based on all those future predictions, what's going to happen to the price of Bitcoin, right? How much money are you going to make if you bought it today? That sort of thing. So I see three possibilities for a future value of Bitcoin. Number one, I see that there could be some kind of replacement for Bitcoin, right? So like I said, you know, somebody launches a coin, be it a central bank or a major player or one of the existing coins overtakes it. Those are possibilities. I think if that happened, eventually there would be a slow dwindling and an eventual wipeout of the value of Bitcoin. It would essentially become a digital collectible. Hey kids, look at grandpa, he's got some of those old Bitcoins. I do think that is a possibility, and in that sense, the value of Bitcoin would, if you project it into the future, very quickly go to almost nothing. I think the other possibility is stagnation in the value of Bitcoin. You know, I think we could be close to an equilibrium point in the value of Bitcoin where it becomes basically a niche fintech solution. Because if some of these other risks materialize, I think what could potentially happen to Bitcoin is that it becomes useful only as a frictionless global currency and a way to easily move value around the globe, right? Because it's really, really good at that. That's a big problem that exists. And fintech is not able to really address that, because fintech solutions are constrained within countries and within the laws of those countries and that kind of thing. So I think that could happen. And then you're only going to get growth in the value of Bitcoin to the extent that it's useful in that sense. The other possibility is that there could be continued growth. You know, in that scenario, it would be basically the value of Bitcoin would be anchored to your fiat currencies, right? So I think that would continue to hold the value at a certain level, because remember, if you're paying so much Bitcoin for a Tesla, obviously that Tesla is still going to be buyable with US dollars, and so that's really going to dictate the price of Bitcoin. Not that there's a peg necessarily in the future, I don't think, in that scenario, but there will be an anchor around Bitcoin that sort of ties it to perceptions of value in terms of the fiat currencies. Now, that's not a bad story. I think that would still lead to continued growth in the value of Bitcoin from where we are today. It would lead to quite a lot of growth, I think, from where we are right now. And so if that were to happen, then I think investing today would be a good situation. Now, you'll notice that in those three scenarios, right, I see some kind of disaster that leads to pretty much no value. I see stagnation in the current value, or maybe a little bit above what it is now, or I see basically slow continued growth from what happens now. The possibility that I don't see in the future is the one that the Bitcoin bulls are pegging a lot of their hopes on, I think, which is Bitcoin will take over the world, right? It will be the ultimate solution. It will be a replacement to all the fiat currencies. It will become legal tender. And all of the legacy banking and economic frameworks that we know today will fall away, and we'll enter this Bitcoin utopia, right? I don't see a path forward for that happening. I think there's way too many things that will continue to prevent that, right? So I don't think that's going to happen. And I think that if you're buying Bitcoin today, betting on that particular world into the future, I would really advise against it, right? I would far sooner make an investment in Bitcoin today, gambling on continued growth as an asset, as a form of bartering, and see that go into the future, and see the value of Bitcoin increase from where we are today slowly based on increased adoption, right? Those are trends that I feel really confident about. This possibility of it becoming legal tender, I just don't see that, and I would not invest my money on that particular scenario. Anyway, guys, that's how I see things. Please let me know in the comments how you see it. Let me know where I'm wrong. Let me know where I'm right. Love to hear from you. Please throw that video a like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.